but it's helping people see an authentic Jesus, the same type of Jesus that I know and love.
All of those emotions of feeling insecure, all of the experiences from my past, like all of those heavy things that was keeping me in one place came flooding out of me.
Inevitably, it's not until I'm there, the blood, sweat, and tears, seeing really what they're doing, hearing the real life stories from people, that's when the song comes.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. I'm Brian Howard. We're here on the campus of Brigham Young University, Idaho. And joining me today is Christian Mawlam. Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Chris works with me here at BYU-Idaho. He's in the communication department, teaches video production courses. Has been here for what, 7 years?
7 years,
7
yeah.
years, wow.
7 years.
Chris grew up in the UK, in Billingham is the place, and I had to get the pronunciation right before because I tend to make it sound like ham, Billingham. And I also ended up coming here to BYU-Idaho to teach, ran a video production company before that, and also a cancer survivor, which is a story we want to talk about as well. So, Chris, you grew up in the UK in Billingham. What was it like, especially growing up as a member of the church? You had a very active family.
Church was always lots of fun. I think kind of like, church in the 80s for I think the world over, it plays a big part in your social life, doesn't it? That kind of thing, activities, lots of programs and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm certainly not so old as to remember the unconsolidated block of the Sunday. But
you just aged me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, because that seems like a bright memory. So, but I can certainly remember just a big part of it. Lots of my friends as well, who I'm still friends with now. I have lots of friends who weren't members, but ones that you're super close with were kind of like church friends. Yep. And so yeah.
The decision to go on a mission, was that an easy one you struggled with?
Well, no, it was easy, but it certainly wasn't something that was on the cards. I mean, notwithstanding this kind of real heavy church exposure growing up, it was kind of, when I hit the teenage years, it was kind of like maybe the effervescence kind of bubbled out of me, and I was left a little bit flat with regards to this church thing is good for my mum and dad, but it's not really for me. And I pretty much did my own thing. I mean, I always went to church for the most part to keep my parents sweet. Throughout my teenage years, even late teenage years, I was doing school, kind of scraping by really. And for someone who could do reasonably well if I actually applied myself, that was kind of the repeated report card would always say, kind of. For me, school was just, it was a place to just go and see my mates and hang out and just have fun. It was like, we get to hang around with each other every day, and it was great fun. Even throughout high school as well, I was a bit lackadaisy with regards to that. And that started to catch up with me because when I got just enough qualifications to go on to the next stage, of British kind of schooling, which is you finish high school when you're 16 instead of 18, like here. You do 16, and then you will do almost like a post-university kind of, community college kind of qualification. And so I got just enough qualifications to go do the post-school pre-university bit. And so I went to Sutton Coldfield to do that, and I just dossed about, which was really bad. Far too much freedom. For a 16-year-old, nobody kind of, are you going to class? Nobody really taking register or anything like that. College is different, isn't it? And I didn't flourish through that level of autonomy without someone breathing down my neck and phoning my parents. And so I kind of realised that I was going to flunk that. And my parents kind of said, well, hey, ultimatum, what are you going to do? Are you going to knuckle down? Or why don't you get a job? Yeah, and so I did get a job, and it was in a curtain rail components factory. I mean, that sounds a little bit Roald Dahl, doesn't it? Like something that Charlie Bucket's dad would do. But yeah, it was in a curtain rail factory, and so they had an injection molding shop and all that. It really focused my ideas of, I don't want to work in a factory. There's nothing wrong with factory work. I mean, it was good. It was a great community, but it was just like, felt it was a little bit kind of untapped talent maybe, or it just wasn't my kind of thing. And so it was like, right, I'm going back to college and I'm going to do a proper qualification. So I did. And so that got me sufficient to do university. But between thinking about going to university and finishing that qualification, I had a little bit of a kind of a Saul on the road to Damascus kind of moment. Yeah, it came to a point where I just kind of like prayed. And notwithstanding being brought up in the church, this was the first kind of adult prayer that I'd ever done. Like, I I mean, you bless the food, don't you? You say it in primary. I mean, you can get up and pay your testimony if someone asks you to, and you'll rattle off the lines and that kind of thing. But it was real, it was heartfelt, and it was personal, and it was, and it worked. It was a real, genuine connection. And so for me, it was kind of, notwithstanding born in the covenant and baptized, receiving the gift of the Holy Ghost, it was kind of, it isn't just add water, is it? It's add willing. And so for all of that time, I'd just been kind of coasting. It was like, and it was quite the epiphany. It was like, wow, so this is what the Holy Ghost feels like, that people talk about. This is why people are into this. And so it was on the back of that really quite transformative and formative experience that I can remember saying to my parents, "That's me, I'm going on a mission." Like, woo, happy day. Yeah, and they're like, "See, we were right all along." And I'm like, "No, yeah, that's okay." So I gave them that much. But before university, I went on a mission, and that was to the Island Dublin mission. I mean, I always say this to young people who are thinking of going on missions. It's like, I said, I think it would be really good for you to go on a mission, but don't go into it with your eyes kind of closed, expecting you to be this kind of amazing experience from day to day, home run after home run. It's probably going to be the hardest or most difficult thing you've done in your life to date. Yeah. And especially with 18-year-olds going on missions. I think we do them a disservice when we say it's everything is awesome kind of thing. but not that you want to kind of put a downer on anything, right, because you're going to have some serious highs, but you are going to taste the bitter in order for you to really know what the sweet feels like and tastes like. So
temper those expectations.
Yeah, that's it. Dial it back a little bit. Yeah.
But let's jump ahead a little bit, because I want to catch a lot of other things within your life. But
sure.
Mission obviously was a big change for you.
Yeah.
Got back. At what point did you meet your wife Elizabeth? And then I want to get into you had started a company, and then you ended up maybe having wanderlust, or maybe it was Elizabeth, and you ended up applying for a job here. But how did you meet Elizabeth?
Meet Elizabeth. So come back from a mission. I start university. I'm back in the northeast of England at Teesside University in Middlesbrough there, just adjacent to Billingham and Stockton. And how it was, again, harking back to that idea of where there aren't that many members. There's a good amount of members there. But when there aren't that many members, maybe the people that you know in your own stake are a little bit like your brothers and sisters, so you don't want to date them. Right. They're all like your mates, sisters, and stuff like that. And and it's like, you look too much like my friend, but they're lovely. And so we'd come from 50 miles up the road, and so obviously we were quite exotic for them. and I can remember just asking her out on a date. I said, "Hey, do you want to go out and do?" I think we went out on a big kind of like groupie thing first. And then I made a beeline for her at the end of the night and said, "Hey, do you want me to pop down and see you next week?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be good." And so from there, I just I waved my magic spells, as it were, and just from there, it was just kind of snowballed pretty quickly. I mean, I think it was like 6 months later I popped the question, and the rest, as they say, is the proverbial.
Is the history. Yeah. Well, let's jump into a couple other things, because I think we're about 5-10 minutes though.
Sure.
I want to get into some other stuff, but. You ended up coming up to BYU-Idaho. As I understand it, that was actually Elizabeth who saw the posting and told you about it.
My brother, who had got similar qualifications to me in video production and that kind of thing, he was living in the area, and I said, "Hey, Joel, are you up for doing something together?" And he said, "Well, why not? Yeah, we don't hate each other. So, and so let's do that." And so we made up this company called 90 Second Story, and we were doing that. And it was going well. We were kind of building the business, and we were enjoying ourselves and traveling all over the place. And we built up a pretty reasonable kind of client book of people that we were doing this for, partners. But it was Elizabeth. We had always discussed if we were going to live abroad for the sake of adventure, the grand tour, that we'd do it when the kids were young, so that they wouldn't hate us if we moved. And so that was the rationale. And we'd always had that in the back of our minds, but I certainly didn't at this stage in our with our marriage. Our kids were all under 10 at the time, the ones that we had. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4. And but we weren't thinking, certainly wasn't foremost in my mind, but it was, I can tell you when it was that she came across the job listing. it was the conference weekend where Elder Holland had given a talk about mental health, and it was quite memorable. So I was thinking, oh yeah, that's a great topic. Yeah, someone's talking about that, and it was during that she starts to kind of stray on the internet to like look up positions at BYU. And so it was like, she went there, nothing. She's like, what am I thinking about BYU? And I'm like, come on, getting all pious on her, like, come on, this is Elder Holland here. This is the main event. And she was like, yeah, no, I think there's something that might be worth looking at. And then she remembered, and then she's like, oh, they've got one in Hawaii as well. And so she looks that up, and she'd completely forgotten about BYU-Idaho. And then she goes, what's that other BYU? And I said, oh, it's Idaho, because the guy who trained me on a mission, he came to BYU-Idaho, so I'd remembered what it was called. She looked it up, and she came across the job listing for a video emphasis faculty within the communication department. And it was kind of creepy, because it kind of, everything that was being asked for sounded like what my resume kind of just articulated, but in reverse. And it was like, oh. And she was really keen from the outset, but I wasn't, because I was having good times with Joel at work. And so that was that. And after that day, she said, just give it some thought. And I didn't. I just kind of left it for a week. And then she said, how are you getting on with giving that some thought? And I thought, oh, I hadn't. Bearing in mind, I was the bishop of my ward at the time. So it wasn't like I wasn't busy. Yeah, and so I had plenty on. I felt a little bit duty bound, do you know what I mean, to put in a proper shift as the bishop for the duration, like 5 years or whatever. And I must have been into like 2.5 years into it, something. And I'm only halfway through that. Let's give them what they asked for. But then I prayed about it, and it was kind of like, I'm not saying you need to do this, Christian, but you really do need to give it some thought. Yeah, I've given you a brain, use it. Yeah, but you can't consider something if you haven't even reflected on it yet. So that was the answer I got. And so I did. And I can remember over 2 days following that kind of prayer and that answer, that it was like, I'm really starting to warm to this. But then I'm feeling bad for Joel, because it's, well, he's the other half of this business. What does he do? I didn't want to leave him in the lurch either. And so either way, I go, right, I'll just apply. I'll just put my application in, and then bloop, comes back, video interview. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to fess up to Joel and tell him what's going on here, because this is actually starting to snowball a little bit. And this is the funny part. I said, Joel, I'm applying for this job in the States. And he says, oh, that's good, because I had an interview last week with Lloyd's Banking Group. And I'm like, really? So that's how that worked out. He said that, and then it was like, oh, okay. And so I can remember doing the video interview. I remember seeing yourself and the other people, and it was even stronger, kind of, yeah. And when you're on the receiving end of an interview, you're not telling people how you're feeling, are you? Or FYI, the Spirit said, you're the one. Yeah. And it wasn't that the Spirit said you are the one. The Spirit was just kind of, yeah, you'd really like to do this, wouldn't you? I was like, yeah, I'd really like to do this. And so that's how it was. And then came over for an interview proper, did a teaching demo, and it I felt it went well. It was a really good connection with the people, top rapport with the people I met. And it was like, wow, but this place is really different. So I was like, wow, this is a big change. Again, it was just the case of me and Elizabeth deciding. The kids weren't stakeholders. They were baggage, weren't they? They were all under 10. So yeah, we're just going to bring them whatever. And so the university was great, and paid for us to come back over to kind of do a little bit of house hunting, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, we were all set for the big move. And so we came over in 2014, started in the September of 2014, and been here 7 years since, and loved it. Like, really, really nice. That is not to say that that it isn't hard to kind of do the whole immigrant bit, to change from something which is so culturally different. A lot of people will say to me, what's better or worse? And it's like, it's really kind of counterproductive to go the old better and worse, who's winning, who's losing kind of thing. It is genuinely just different. Yeah. It just is. Yeah. And but notwithstanding that, one of the nice things that is a bit of a constant is the church, isn't it? I mean, it's same in books, same kind of books and scriptures and that kind of thing. And so there's that universal aspect to it. but it's just some of the cultural frustrations, I think, that you just have to kind of get over. And that took me a good 2 or 3 years to kind of get over that. And just to kind of like settle in and kind of just let go. It was always a little bit kind of on the plow looking back kind of thing. But you just have to kind of just go with the flow.
I do want to talk about when you did get here, adapted well, but then health issues. Let's talk about the health issues.
Sure.
Then, so it's about, you were having some problems with your circulation with your leg.
I did.
What happened?
Well, it first manifested itself on campus, not in any kind of dramatic way. One part of the campus is there, another part of the campus is here. The Spory is down here, and walking up to the kind of the bigger buildings to kind of engage with the program elsewhere. I get cramp in my left leg, in my calf, and I'm like, flip, I know I'm not in great shape, but I'm not in that kind of bad shape. And so it was like, what's going on? And this wasn't like I was running anywhere. I'd always walk quick, but a cramp in that leg. And so long story short, went to the doctors. They did all sorts of tests to try and figure out what it was. Is it compartment syndrome? And I'm like, well, that's what marathon runners get. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm clearly not that. And then they did a series of kind of flow tests. Yeah, the ankle brachial test and that kind of thing to see what the blood flow was like. And it's like, you've got really kind of depleted blood flow to your left extremity there. And so they thought, what could this be? Went to a consulting radiologist, so like kind of someone who can do clot busting and that kind of thing, and was booked in the January of 2018 for just after Christmas. I think it was like the 28th actually of December, and that was for a little routine clot busting thing. And he was like, "Yeah, get this done, you'll be fine." Went to do it, so went to Idaho Falls just down the road there, and I can remember them kind of bringing me round. It was semi-conscious sedation whilst they're doing this, and they said, "You're going to be flown down to University of Utah. This is not going well at all." So it's like, all right, fair enough. But I was high as a kite, so it was like whatever. But when I got there, they were super serious. They said, we're going to do a fasciotomy, which is in order for the blood to be able to flow in this leg, we're going to kind of slice open your fascia, which is that big muscle that holds your calf together. So slice, bump like a piece of meat. My leg went, and they said, but that is only the thin end of this iceberg, because the wedge, because when they got in there to do the clot busting, they realised that it had been so blood deprived that the artery had started to just fail and come apart. And so they said, we are going to take a vein from this leg and pop it into there and call it an artery now. It's going to get promoted. And that's how we're going to save your circulation in this leg. Otherwise, you will lose this leg. And I'm like, where do we go from here? This is meant to be a routine clot busting thing to this. So again, they did that. They did this this arterial kind of change over there, and but it failed, and it failed 3 times to the extent where tearfully the surgeon came in to see me and said, on Wednesday next week, we're going to try it again. And if it fails, this arterial bypass, then we'd like you to consider where you would like the amputation to be, above the knee, below the knee. And I'm like, dear me, this is extreme. But I said, I'll give it some thought, kind of thing. And then genuinely, miraculously, it did take just, there was a pulse in my foot. And the surgeon, who by all accounts isn't fully religious or anything like active in any church, said, yeah, sometimes God and surgery surprise us. I was like, thank you. Yeah, I'll take it. And so that was intense, like genuinely. But coming home, recovering after that, staples from all the way down my legs, hundreds of staples. Recuperating, I had a bit of an episode. A friend of mine came round to see me and he said, hey, I've brought you some Panda Express. And I'm like, oh yeah, I could do with that. Why not? Bit of comfort food. Yeah. And so I ate it and I felt really bad after it. It wasn't the Panda Express. Yeah. It was my insides. For years, I'd had something called ulcerative colitis. Yeah. It's like an inflammatory bowel thing. And there was an obstruction like in my intestine. And so, in the large intestine. And so I went to the hospital, they did a scan, and they were like, we're just going to take a biopsy of that obstruction, yeah, because that looks problematic. And then they come back and say, oh, you got colon cancer.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh, yeah. And they said, FYI, it's not just kind of colon cancer. It's stage 3 because it's spread to the adjacent lymph nodes. And so I'm like, oh, dear me, this is 2018, the gift that keeps on giving, yeah. And so I was in hospital for a good long while. I had that semester off because I was in such a bad way. And so, they removed the colon and the affected adjacent lymph nodes, and then started chemo once I'd recovered from those surgeries. And yeah, I mean, cancer's an interesting one because it does kind of, I mean, I'm usually quite optimistic, and it wasn't like I spiraled into some kind of miasmic depression. I didn't. I genuinely felt quite sustained throughout. Which was nice. I mean, I consider that to be a real blessing, not to kind of go panic mode. But there were some times, and still are, because subsequently, up to date now in 2021, we did that, and then you go into surveillance mode. So it kind of eradicated it as much as we thought. You go into surveillance mode, getting scanned, blood tests and scans every so many months. And they wanted to keep on top of that because of the amount of lymph nodes that were affected. I think it was like 12 lymph nodes, which was quite the high amount. And so the chemo worked for all intents and purposes. I mean, nice things like, I'm saying nice things, but like my hair didn't fall out and stuff like that, which is, I mean, that's the first thing I thought, oh, cancer, my hair's going to fall out. A very vain thing to think. And it's awful for people who do, isn't it? But yeah, it didn't. It thinned out. I got thinner, which was a little fringe benefit of chemo. And I did feel sick, but I wasn't like horrifically sick. And again, so I think that I kind of got off lightly with that when it affects so many other people. It's a bit of a lottery, isn't it, as to how you're going to respond biologically or chemically to these processes. And so there was another couple of year and a bit, and then it popped back up again. And it kind of moved ever so slightly to just under my duodenum, which is your little pipe near your stomach there, where your esophagus is. And so it was on one lymph node. And so they operated on that. And I've just been 2 months clear of that bout of chemo to follow up on that. And so I'm back in surveillance. And so that's where I am with on the cancer front.
Well, I do want to, even though we're over time, which is good because I want to hear all about this. Obviously, when you talk from a religious perspective, we're here for challenges. Obviously, we're given challenges, and sometimes we don't like them very much.
Oh, yeah.
But there's definitely lessons to be learned. From your perspective, what are some of the things that, looking back over a really turbulent 2018, 2019, what are some things that you gathered from that?
One of the things that I've learned to do, and I think that the Lord has kind of helped me to kind of dial this in, is just to deal with what's in front of you. I mean, of course, I want to have a long and prosperous life and everything that every other human being would like to have. But just dealing with what you've got. Sometimes I think I'm a little bit curt with people, a little bit. I always thought I was blunt anyway, but I think this has made me more blunt, where I'm kind of, it's not that I'm on the clock because I'm dying. I don't think I am. The medical records don't say I've got cancer at the moment. I'm in the clear for the moment. But because you've kind of had that brush with this extreme, you just go, well, hang on. If there's a problem that needs to be sorted out now, like in a relationship or something like that, let's just talk about it. Let's not leave something kind of festering or anything like that. So let's not leave things undone that we can deal with God and with Christ and with each other. So that would be my big takeaway for cancer. Which is a benefit, isn't it? Benefit. Thanks for cancer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, Chris, it's always fun to talk with you. Always have a good time when I chat with you. Just for my part, appreciative. I was on the other end as we did the hiring process, and it was definitely something that we were guided, and you were the guy, so you weren't the only one having those feelings. So we're so appreciative that you're here, and I do recall very distinctly as you were going through those difficulties that our department offered many prayers on your behalf. Oh, yeah. We felt like there were answers to those prayers.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I mean, just as another, not an aside, wholly associated with this, was the prayers of everyone at work and in our ward and on the other side of the ocean as well, but just how tangible other people's prayers can be. Like literally think about it. It just used to melt me. I just go, oh, thank goodness for all of these good people who they just care. And that's, I suppose that's what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about, isn't it? Caring and learning to care better and more specifically about people.
Yeah, very much so. Chris, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nice to have you close by that you can share your story. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.